You are about to give birth. There is no hospital, no epidural, no monitor beeping out your baby's heartbeat, no doctor who has done this 1,000 times before. There is no painkiller stronger than a chewed root. If something goes wrong, there is no emergency room 10 minutes away. There is only whoever happens to be near you and whatever they happen to know. And here's the part that should make you sit up a little. This isn't a hypothetical for most of human history. This was simply what birth was. For roughly 300,000 years, every single human being who has ever existed arrived into the world this way. No exceptions, no machines, no backup plan. Which means every one of your ancestors, going back thousands of generations, somehow survived this. The mother survived it. The baby survived it. Over and over, generation after generation, in caves, in huts, on open ground, in conditions that should, by any reasonable measure, have killed far more people than it did. So the question isn't just how did ancient humans survive childbirth? The question is, why does the human body make childbirth so dangerous in the first place? And how did our species manage to outrun a problem that evolution itself created? Because here's the uncomfortable secret hiding underneath this whole topic. Human childbirth isn't just difficult. By the standards of the animal kingdom, it's almost absurdly difficult. We are, biologically speaking, terrible at giving birth, and understanding why is going to take us through twisted anatomy, ancient skeletons with the evidence still written into the bone, a theory that suggests human women may be the only primates on Earth who evolutionarily require help to give birth at all, and the surprisingly dark math of exactly how often this used to go wrong. Let's start with the part nobody really thinks about. Why is this hard in the first place? Picture almost any other mammal giving birth. A gazelle, a wolf, even our closest living relatives, chimpanzees and bonobos. In nearly every case, the mother gives birth alone, often in under 30 minutes, and the baby is born facing toward her. She can reach down, guide the baby out, clear its airway, pull it onto her chest. It is, relatively speaking, a private and manageable event. Human birth does not work like this, and the reason comes down to a genuinely strange piece of anatomical engineering called the rotational birth canal. Here's the problem. Walking upright on two legs requires a narrow basin-shaped pelvis to support the body's weight efficiently, but a big brain requires a big head. These two evolutionary pressures, walking efficiently and thinking complexly, were pulling in opposite directions for millions of years. The result is a birth canal that isn't a simple straight tube. It's twisted, almost like a corkscrew, narrower at some points than others, oval in one direction at the entrance and oval in a completely different direction at the exit. To get through it, a human baby has to rotate during birth, not once, but sometimes twice, turning its head and then its shoulders at different angles to slip through the narrowest points in sequence. And because of this twist, something happens that occurs in no other primate on the planet. The baby is born facing away from the mother, not toward her. Let that sink in for a second. If you are giving birth alone and the baby emerges facing away from you, you cannot easily reach down and guide it the way a chimpanzee can. You cannot easily clear its airway. If the umbilical cord is wrapped around its neck, which happens often, you are working blind, behind your own body, at the most physically exhausting and painful moment of the entire process. Pulling a baby out the wrong way at this stage can injure its spine. Some researchers believe this anatomical quirk may be one of the most quietly significant facts in all of human evolution, because it suggests something startling. Human mothers may never have been built to do this completely alone. This brings us to a hypothesis that doesn't get nearly enough attention outside of academic anthropology circles, called obligate midwifery. It was developed by anthropologists Wenda Krivathan and Karen Rosenberg, and the core idea is almost unsettling once you really absorb it. The theory proposes that humans may be the only species on Earth, the only one, where natural selection favored mothers giving birth with assistance, because solo birth was dangerous enough, often enough, that having a second pair of hands present measurably improved survival odds for both the mother and child. Think about what that actually implies. It means that somewhere far back in our evolutionary past, the simple presence of another person at birth wasn't a cultural nicety, it was closer to a biological requirement, woven into how natural selection shaped us as a species. Compare this to a chimpanzee, where solitary birth works fine, where a mother in labor will often actively move away from the rest of the group to be alone. Humans appear to have evolved in the opposite direction entirely. We may have evolved to need each other in the room, and once you know to look for it, the evidence shows up everywhere in the historical and ethnographic record. Anthropologists studying traditional and hunter-gatherer societies across radically different parts of the world, the Hadza of Tanzania, groups across Papua New Guinea, indigenous communities throughout the Americas, have found a pattern that holds with striking consistency. Solo, unattended childbirth is rare. In the vast majority of documented traditional societies, women give birth with at least one, often several, experienced attendants, mostly other women, frequently a mother, a sister, an aunt, or an older woman in the group who had been through birth herself multiple times and had effectively become the community's accumulated expert on the subject. These birth attendants weren't passive witnesses. They actively supported the laboring mother physically, holding her upright, helping her change positions, applying counterpressure during contractions, and psychologically, talking her through the pain, reassuring her, keeping her calm in moments where panic could genuinely make things worse. And here's where it gets genuinely fascinating, because this isn't just an interesting historical footnote, it's a pattern that modern medical research has accidentally rediscovered and confirmed. Multiple clinical studies on what researchers call continuous labor support, essentially a doula, found that women who had a calm, experienced, continuous companion present during labor experienced measurably shorter labors, fewer complications, and significantly less reliance on medical intervention, even in fully modern hospital settings with all the equipment available. The body, it turns out, still responds to the presence of trusted support the same way it did 100,000 years ago. The hardware never updated. This wasn't superstition. This was an unconscious, deeply embedded survival strategy, one specific enough that researchers now refer to it informally as the doula effect, and one that traditional societies seem to have stumbled onto and refined for thousands of generations before anyone wrote a single word about hormones or stress physiology. Now let's talk about something the channel rarely gets into, the actual numbers, because they are sobering and they explain exactly why this support system mattered so much. Estimating maternal mortality in prehistoric populations is difficult, but researchers working from skeletal evidence, comparative data on modern unassisted birth populations, and historical records from pre-industrial societies generally converge on a range. Somewhere between 1 and 2% of births likely ended in the mother's death. That number sounds almost manageable on its own. It is not, because a 1 to 2% risk per birth doesn't happen once. In societies without reliable contraception, where women might give birth 6, 8, or more times across their reproductive years, that risk compounds. Some estimates suggest the cumulative lifetime risk of dying from childbirth-related causes in prehistoric and pre-industrial populations may have approached 15 to 25%. Let that number sit there for a moment. In some populations, roughly 1 in 5 or 6 women may have ultimately died as a result of childbirth at some point across their reproductive life. And the evidence for this isn't just statistical guesswork, it's written directly into the bones. Archaeologists studying female skeletons from prehistoric burial sites look for something called pubic symphysis scarring, small grooves and pitting on the pubic bone caused by the physical stress of childbirth, which lets researchers estimate how many times a woman had given birth even thousands of years after her death. In some excavated burials, archaeologists have found something far more haunting: the skeletal remains of a fetus still positioned within the mother's pelvis, physical evidence of an obstructed labor that ended in the death of both. These aren't abstract statistics, they're frozen moments of crisis preserved in stone and bone for tens of thousands of years. This is the backdrop against which everything else in this story has to be understood. Birth wasn't just hard, it was, statistically, one of the single most dangerous events a human human being would ever go through, and it happened over and over across a woman's life. So knowing all of that, what did ancient humans actually do to push those odds in their favor? The answer is more sophisticated than most people expect.